Right, good morning, everybody. My name's Mark. Usually I'm here with Sarah and 3 kids, but they're all sick. So where do I start? Forgive me, I'm going to be looking at my notes quite a bit. I won't give any eye contact too much. But 2 weeks ago, I stood down the back. I was chatting to Andrew, and he was trying to explain to me that today will be about testimonies. And as soon as he started mentioning the word testimonies, I started going like this. Didn't want to give him any eye contact. I could gauge from his tone and his body language that he wanted to ask me. And of course he did. Now I couldn't directly look at Andrew because a fear came over me. Not a godly fear, but a fear from the enemy that he said that I wouldn't share this weekend. That he'd find a way to prevent me, that he'd make me fearful. And over the course of the last 2 weeks, we've had quite an eventful one. Harvey fell last Tuesday, split his head open again. Our car has been back and forth to the mechanic. We spent loads of money getting it fixed, and on Friday it failed the MOT. Our wall was crashed into again on Thursday morning, and the guy, he fled the scene, even though we were trying to help him. All geared for preventing this morning. Even this morning, Harvey and Connie weren't great, and I almost texted Andrew at 10:30 saying, "Not this morning, big lad, I'm not coming." But thankfully I've made it, purely because there's actual joy in the trials. James 1:2-4 says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the test of your faith produces endurance, and let that endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." So it's only by God's grace and mercy that I am actually stood here, giving this testimony. Mark of 5 years ago would have laughed of Mark of right now. I can vividly remember standing in our kitchen shortly after we bought our house off Andrew, listening to him and Sarah chatting about Scripture and the Bible. I can't exactly remember what they were saying, but I do remember having zero interest. And almost part of me wanted to kick off, find faults in what they were saying. But little did I know that fast forward 5 years, I would be stood here, speaking about my life, and how my life is not my own, but the Lord's. And to create a full circle moment, I'm stood in the church that Andrew is part of. So it's always been 4 years since I was saved and became a Christian. But I was born and raised as a Catholic, and maybe more importantly, a very proud Catholic, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's in that process. I would attend Mass weekly, but I would never really engage in what was being said, basically just attending to appease my parents, even into adulthood. Now, my parents would have been religious on the face of it, knowing certain things spiritually, but we never ever had a Bible. We never read from the Bible. We never took teaching from the Bible throughout the week or at Mass, and that was not something I even questioned. Being a Catholic or a Protestant is obviously very important in Northern Ireland, more so in any other area, and I was deeply proud and stubborn of my Catholicness. So when me and Sarah began to date, she would ask if we could and would take Joey to church. But I couldn't allow myself just to go to church. I wanted us to go to chapel. My stubbornness and my pride wouldn't let us go to church. But Sarah didn't push. She allowed God to work. And in 2021, we did attend a Christian church together. But God had already been at work at this point. So through the year of 2021, while Sarah was pregnant with Harvey, she had felt compelled and conflicted that we needed to start trusting in the Lord. Sarah was brought up a Christian, but she had backslidden, and obviously I wasn't helping to prevent that. Sarah had a Bible, which eventually we did start reading together. I would read to her when she would rest, or when Harvey came along, she would be feeding him. But we had no real structure to it. But obviously it was much better reading her Bible than not reading her Bible. Sarah then met a neighbour of hers walking along the road one day, and they started to speak, and clearly this lady was a Christian. Sarah and her developed a friendship, and she gave us a book that led us to have more structure in our Bible reading. This helped guide our reading, and my mind, and more importantly, my heart began to open to what the Lord had to say. I was learning things I had never heard before and hearing directly from God himself. The more I'd read, the more conflicted I felt. Sarah and I would obviously lock horns over certain aspects of my Catholic upbringing, for me to only be blown away by the truth in God's Word. I started to see and let go of my pride. And when I did decide to attend church together, when we did decide church together, it still didn't click. I still felt out of place. I would pray a lot more together instead of me praying to maybe certain saints like it would be in a Catholic church. I was praying directly to the Lord. Which brings me to John 14:6. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. I wasn't going to come to the Lord unless it was through the Son, Jesus Christ. And I experienced this on the night of the 23rd of November 2021. Now on this night I had a very simple but yet special dream. I don't know if you've ever had a dream where you've woke from it and wanted to jump directly straight back into that dream. Well, this happened to me that night, not just once, not just twice, but 6 to 8 times. Now, I don't know if you know what a terrarium is. It's like a glass bottle, usually quart, which has like soil and plants and all living within inside it. Now, Sarah had bought one of these prior to this for the purpose of using in our wedding, which I might get around to discussing if time allows me. And it was sat on our landing outside out of our room. Now, in my dream, in the dream, it felt like I was watching this terrarium while that verse, John 14:6, was on repeat. I'd wake up, I'd go to the toilet, pass the terrarium on my way to the toilet and back. I would then go back to sleep and again straight back into the dream, watching this terrarium maybe from a different angle, while John 14:6 was on repeat. This happened, as I say, 8 to 6 times. With each time I woke, I felt like I needed to walk by the terrarium, not essentially needing to go to the toilet. If I did, I might need to get that checked out. And I returned to bed each time and into this dream. But every time I returned, I got hotter and hotter, like I was burning up. Well, the Lord was burning inside of me. On the last rerun of the dream, the cork on top of the terrarium was gone. That morning, I felt in complete awe of the dream, even though it was amazingly simple. And when I told Sarah, I could see a joy on her face. So we prayed together. And as we prayed together, I chose to give my heart and life to God. Now that terrarium, that terrarium and all within it represented my life, or I believe it represented my life anyway. Living and surviving, but with constraints and shackled, but oblivious to it all, as it appeared like I had it all. I was unaware that I needed to be saved, and life is limited, and I have sinned. God released me from this old self. The shackles were gone. The life was now free, or I was now free. Prior to this, when we attended the church, like I said, I didn't feel like I was part of it or in the right place. But when we attended that church again shortly after me being saved, it felt completely right. Nothing was missing. I felt completely changed, fully ready to embrace this new life that the Lord had gracefully and mercifully given me. Now, touching back, we have time, on our wedding, obviously Sarah and I didn't do things right prior to Harvey. We obviously had him out of wedlock. I wasn't saved, didn't really care for marriage too much. As long as we loved each other, we lived together, we looked after the children, sure, why not? We're okay. But the conflictions and convictions I felt whilst reading the Bible is that we were doing this wrong, that we needed to be married. So Harvey arrived in August, and by September we had everything planned. But we sold it as a naming ceremony for Harvey and a party for Joey. I.e., the majority of our guests didn't know that they were coming to our wedding at all. It was going to be a surprise. Some people did know, again, like Andrew and Michelle. Our wedding took place in February, 6 months after Harvey, because again, we felt convicted we needed to get married straight away. We would have done it sooner, but family and friends probably meant we had to push it back for 6 months. But the enemy tried to derail things, and I asked my closest cousin to be my best man. And then in January, he decided not to be part of my life anymore because of what I told him about being a Christian. But we went on ahead. Since that wedding, we haven't spoke. I have tried to reach out to him, congratulate him for his children or having children, and he hasn't returned. But this caused me and Sarah almost to stop things or put things on hold. But in guidance from God and close Christian friends, we remained on course and did get married in February 2022. I think that's the date. On that day, obviously everyone or most were surprised, but then I also chose to tell our guests of how God had changed me in my speech. It wasn't a long song and dance, but a gentle nod to everyone who was there that I was now trying to change due to God's grace. But again, the enemy was at work. Close friends of mine who were prior to this wedding have now slowly phased us out of their lives, some more so than others. However, the Lord was still at work. My uncle, who I viewed as a very cynical but intelligent man, made me very aware of how how amazed he was. Then a work colleague took me outside and handed me a piece of paper from his wallet which read, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight." For years I'd worked with this fella, and we had built up a close relationship, but I was unaware that he also trusted the Lord. What an encouragement that was. I could continue here for hours. Unfortunately, if I did, more tears would flow. I did choose to get rebaptized in 2022. We were there on the beach in Portrush to witness other friends to get baptized. And as the last one came out of the water, one of the guys doing it, he shouted out, "Is there anybody else that needs or wants to be baptized?" And I instantaneously threw up my hand. But again, the enemy was not pleasant. As I told my parents that I'd been rebaptized, they took it as an insult because I had already been baptized as an infant. But I guess their pride was overtaken. But since then they have softened, and they do reach out to us to get them to pray for them. They acknowledge that we are Christians and we are doing things different to them. And the Lord has led us to homeschool, meaning we've had to go to one wage. Prior to that, I never would have thought we could have lived off one wage, but the Lord has seen us through. He has provided more, and that is all I can say today. Thank you.